and welcome to SRIRAM's IES. In this video, we will be discussing the prime difference between CPI and wholesale price index. That's not all. And why is this topic in news? That is the most crucial part of this discussion. That if the RBI's inflation has increased by more than the target, if it has breached the target of 4%, it has reached 4.4%, what are the reasons behind this rise? Is it because that it is only at the nominal level, or is it because it's only because at the or is it because that there is the imported inflation, or is it because of the domestic causes? Why has this inflation breached the number of 4.4%? And what has happened when we talk about the merchandise import of India as compared to last year? All of these questions will be answered in this video in next 10 minutes. What I request all of you is to keep a pen and paper with you so that you note down key facts and key points. This will help you in revising it further, and particularly when it comes to your exam, you can directly hit the question. So therefore, the context of this news is very simple, that it was since January 2026 that the first time today our inflation level has increased and breached the mark of 4%, and our inflation has currently is rising and is at this point of time at 4.38%. Now, let's understand that why did this happen? What's the reason behind this? First of all, the data says that retail inflation in June 2026 is 4.38%, out of which the main component is food inflation. And if you talk about consumer food inflation index, consumer food price inflation index, now this index shows that there is 5.3% inflation rate in June 2026. That is the prime factor behind inflation. Further, the transport sector, inflation in transport sector has also increased. Now due to this, why has this increased? Because the price of crude oil has reached around $110 per barrel. That is the reason behind this, and this is known as imported inflation. Not only this, when the prices of gold have hit higher, when the prices of gold and silver have increased, when the import duty on gold and silver has doubled from 6% to 15%. Currently, our import duty on gold is around 15%. So that is why that all of these reasons cumulatively are impacting the inflation which we are seeing at this level. That is why we are moving from CPI based index to wholesale price index, and now to producer price index. Now producer price index, earlier we used to calculate wholesale price index, now we have moved to CPI, and further we will be moving towards producer price index, PPI, and that we have a timeline of 5 years, and in the next 5 years we will be moving towards PPI because of the global standards and multiple other things, and we have started to accumulate data and calculate data based on PPI. One more reason behind this is that when you talk about food plus fuel inflation, this encompasses around 27% of inflation is because of the food and fuel. There is an inflation rate of 27% in the food and fuel sector only. But when you talk about wholesale level, there is more inflation. If you see at the wholesale level, the inflation rate in June 2026 was 9.87%. And fuel and power inflation is around 27%, which I discussed earlier. Transport inflation is 4.3%, and the transport services for goods, the price of transport services for goods has also increased to around 7.7%. Because of these factors, the inflation numbers are totally changing. Therefore, there is a gap between the wholesale price index and the consumer price index. Consumer price index shows an inflation rate of 4.4%, but wholesale price index shows an inflation rate of 9.8%. Do you understand that there is a deviation between the two? What are the reasons behind this? First reason is US-Iran conflict. Due to this conflict, there is higher crude oil prices, which has inflated our import bill. Now we are paying more in terms of imports, which we were paying earlier. सपोज अगर हम लास्ट ईयर 10,000 टन और 10,000 बैरल्स ऑफ क्रूड ऑयल लेके आ रहे थे, वो सस्ता पड़ रहा था। इस बार वही सेम 10,000 बैरल्स ऑफ क्रूड ऑयल हमें महंगा पड़ रहा है। That is because of this conflict and rising crude oil prices. Because of this, our import bill has increased, our current account deficit has increased, our rupee has depreciated. Our rupee has depreciated, which has increased the cost of imports. Further, due to the higher input cost at producer level, this will lead to higher prices at wholesale level, which further will lead to wholesale higher prices at consumer level also. That is how the inflation from top level goes on to the bottom level and reaches the consumer. Do you understand? One more thing. When you talk about merchandise trade, the trade which India is doing with the world, we currently are importing around $70 billion of merchandise, which earlier last year was just around $54.1 billion. Last year June it was $54 billion. This year it is $70 billion. That is how you can see that how much current account deficit must be widening because of this. Understood? One more important point, that is the outlook behind this inflation. That once this inflation hits, what will happen? Although there is a ceasefire which may happen, although there is a trade deal between India and USA which may happen or which may get concluded, but all of this has long-term implications. All of this inflation has long-term implications. That is why this editorial clearly mentions that there is one pertinent thing which we all must understand, that this inflation level, this target, breaching of the target, despite of decreasing the interest rate, there will be very minimal effect on the inflation rate which we are facing currently. Do you understand this? Now, one more important point which we should understand is why this inflation is rising. First, we discussed rising fuel prices, rising crude oil prices, which has reached $110 per barrel. Import dependence has increased because India, around 85% of its crude oil is imported. That is why due to huge imports, due to huge import dependence, due to rupee depreciation and the pass through of costs, the costs at wholesale level are, I would say, trickling down to the consumer level. Understood? Monsoon concerns gold and silver prices. These are the two things which you must remember. First of all, we had a shortfall in monsoon this year. हमारा monsoon बहुत कम हुआ है, इस बार बारिश बहुत कम हुई है, जिसकी वजह से फूड आउटपुट और आई वुड से एग्रीकल्चरल आउटपुट डिक्रीज होगा. जो ही कंज्यूमर सप्लाई डिक्रीज होगी, जो ही एग्रीगेट सप्लाई डिक्रीज होगी एग्रीकल्चर की, उसकी वजह से प्राइसेस इंक्रीज होना स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे. बिकॉज एग्रीकल्चर गुड्स की जो डिमांड है वो तो कंसिस्टेंट ही रहेगी ना, वो तो उल्टा बढ़ती ही जाती है. इफ यू रिमेंबर द माल्थूस gloomy theory of population and output growth, in which Malthus says that the output increases by arithmetic progression and the population increases by geometric progression. You should remember, if you have not read it in the foundation, you need to consult a mentor. One more thing which you need to remember, gold and silver prices have increased. Why are gold and silver prices increasing more in India than in outside world? Because we are imposing an import duty of up to 15% on gold and silver. That is the reason behind it. One important aspect is that there are cost pressures across key sectors. Why is transport inflation more increasing? Because of fuel. Why are the prices at the restaurants increasing? Because they are getting LPG, which is highly expensive now. Why? The commercial cylinder, which earlier used to be of 1800, now is of 3000 rupees. Those students who are living outside, those people who are living outside but do not have a connection, they are getting the gas cylinders of 3000, 4000 rupees. CPI has increased to 5.3% in June 2026. Higher gold and silver prices have increased the import duties. All of this has increased our trade deficit, which has jumped by around 430%. Due to this jump, because of increase in crude oil prices, gold imports and merchandise imports, because of the gold price volatility, all of these things have led to what? Trade deficit. A jump of 430% in trade deficit of India. Understood? Now, what all does this resemble and why will it impact our monetary policy? Because there is persistent global and domestic price pressure on monetary policy. That monetary policy should be as per to control the inflation, because if you breach the target, if the target of 6% or the target of 2% is breached for consecutively 3 quarters, then there will be a problem. Then the monetary policy failure will be considered. Further, high crude oil prices and imported inflation is unlikely to ease soon, because earlier US and Iran were talking about a ceasefire, but now what is happening? That this ceasefire has khatam ho gaya. Now the problem is that they are not agreeing, and it is less likely that they will agree and stop the war. Food inflation risks are there because monsoon and supply will decrease. RBI will remain cautious and data dependent when it comes to inflation targeting. Understood? However, what are its implications? First is that RBI, the inflation stays above the target, which in January 2026 it was 2.75%, but currently it is 4.4%, which is somehow okay, but it should not go beyond 6%, and if it goes beyond 6%, it should not stay there for more than 2 quarters, and if it stays, then it may cause major problems for India's market. No room for rate cut at MPC meetings in August also. Why? Because if inflation is increasing, we cannot decrease the interest rate. If inflation is increasing, we cannot decrease the interest rate, because decreasing the interest rate will mean what? More inflation. And if we decrease the interest rate, if we do not decrease the interest rate, it will mean that we are curbing on investment. If the investment is decreasing, which means what? The production will decrease. Understood? Higher inflation will reduce purchasing power and savings, which we all know that when inflation happens, the purchasing power of the rupee decreases. Do you understand? It may impact the growth if high costs persist for households and businesses. What are the main key way forward, or how we should approach this inflation? Very simple, we should reduce our import dependence, we should diversify our imports, and we should lead the economy with more and more exports. There should be agricultural productivity increased, strengthening the supply chain and logistics to reduce the cost push inflation and maintain fiscal prudence. That is all for today's discussion, and that is how we conclude today's video. I thank you all for being here, and I wish you all the best for being here and for your future journey in your exam. One pertinent thing which I always remember to mention is that is the Indian economy. If you have any problem in Indian economy, you can watch this PYQ marathon, you can watch that static entire economy marathon, or you can download these notes, 120 pages notes from our official Telegram channel, or you can directly ping me and we will discuss all of your problems regarding economy or any other thing. With this, let's conclude the video. Thank you once again for being here. Jai Hind.